Hi everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our Power of Knowing Forum LinkedIn Live session 133rd edition. Today we are discussing on the topic of culture or strategy, the unseen battle shaping the future of business. We have the honor of having Dr. Sujaya, Banerjee, CEO of Capstone People Consulting, high performance culture expert, leadership and change management global speaker. Without further ado, let's bring Dr. Sujaya onto the desk. Hi, Dr. Sujaya,
Hi.
welcome to our show. How are you?
I'm very good, Prem. Kumar. How are you doing?
Wonderful, man. To start with, how can we foster strategy of a company in terms of and company culture when you talk about, or how do you strike a balance between these both two? If you can give some inputs there.
So I think I want to start by being able to define that, you clearly can't be running a business without having clarity on the company culture. So fostering the strategy is an important starting point. But I think the presumption is that you have the necessary wares in terms of culture to support the strategy. And
Okay.
so, at most times, very fancy strategies or very ambitious strategies or very inspiring strategies basically, don't quite end up delivering to, the promise. And the reason being that the culture is not ready yet to be able to support the strategy. So, so I'm going to start by being able to say that when you say you have a strategy,
Mhm.
I'm going to ask the audience and the viewers to be able to ask themselves a couple of questions, which is how much effort has been made to be able to simplify these strategies so that everyone understands the strategies. So it's not enough to have a strategy, but it's very important. There are people, they're human beings who are going to be implementing and executing the strategy. So to begin with, I think in the uh, brick and mortar days, strategy was a secret document. It was something you didn't share with people. And
True.
it's because most organizations believe that their strategy was a differentiator, and that if they let people know, including their own employees, then this would easily become available in the hands of competition. Now, we're living in times where the strategy is, first of all, to begin with, not your real differentiator. Your differentiator is your culture, which is your ability to execute the strategy is actually your differentiator. So waking up to this reality to begin with is very important. We're living in times where accessing another organization's strategy is not very difficult. And
Yeah.
it's all right if you know what that organization's strategy might be, because it's not the key differentiator. It's the extent to which an organization is prepared and ready to actually execute the strategy that's going to make the difference. And so I want the viewers to be able to view strategy versus culture uh, like an iceberg, right? So what you see on top, right, above the surface, are your values, vision, mission, your strategy, your business plan, your department goals, your processes, your systems, the brand that you advocate, to your stakeholders. And below the surface, what you really have are your deeply held values, beliefs, assumptions, your principles. You know, what principles you uphold while you're basically running the business of business. And so, this below the surface piece is a very significant part that actually defines how you execute whatever is above the surface. And so most of us mistake the organization to be the top of the iceberg that's above the surface, whereas the real organization is everything that's below the surface. That's actually defining how the organization goes about doing things. So I think increasingly there is a realization that strategy is not really your differentiator, your culture is. And so most organizations are waking up to being able to work more around being able to augment what is below the surface so that they're able to address key challenges which will become significant deterrents to actually executing the strategy. Let me give you an example. It's not uncommon for organizations to struggle with collaboration or cohesiveness, for instance. And so, if you have a culture where people work in silos, then you're leaving money on the table, because if you had the cohesiveness and the collaboration, you'd be able to do so much more, right? If you have an organization that does not include people, for example, or does not value contribution across levels within the organization, or is upholding the hierarchy to the point that you believe, and these are presumptions, they're not reality, they're presumptions, that only people at the top of the organization understand strategy and understand, must have the vision and will have the passion for innovation and so on, then you're actually ruling out the rest of the organization that could actually very significantly contribute to problem solving, innovation, and performance. So, what are these deeply held values, beliefs, and assumptions, which I want to call principles, which actually, if you adjust, adapted, and changed, you could actually change the way in which you're achieving the strategy. And so, um, that way in which you're going to achieve the strategy is actually your differentiator as an organization. It's very difficult for anyone, including competition, to be able to copy it, because it's your own unique sort of secret sauce through which you're actually achieving what it is that the organization is setting out to achieve. And that rhythm in which everyone works together, the beliefs with which everyone interacts with each other, the way in which you see the customer, the way in which you see the employee, the way in which you see new talent that's coming to your organization, the way in which you see how you treat people in your everyday interaction with them. How do you inspire people to give their best? Yeah, how are you raising the bar on people's contribution? Yeah, when you say innovation, is this lip service to the word innovation, or do you really understand what it means to manifest innovation? Because it requires many, many elements of strategy to be in place and many principles to be embedded in the below the surface space that will actually manifest innovation. I'll just pause here. It's a
No,
longish answer.
no, I think you've covered a gamut of things that were to be discussed in one question. I think you are right in saying that when you said leaving cash on the table, very important point there actually. People don't understand the value of a feedback that can come in or an input that can come in. And that makes a lot of difference in the company's culture when people are heard about and what they want to do. I think that is a major pointer that I would take from your input. In your experience, how has the importance of culture evolved in the recent years? And what has it uh, done onto the strategic decision making?
So I'm just going to respond to that by saying I think that culture as a differentiator is pretty apparent, particularly in these very disruptive and very sort of unprecedented times of upheavals. I think all organizations have woken up to the fact that culture is a very defining it's a very defining uh, element that is going to it's going to define whether you achieve your strategies or not. It is too important and too all pervasive to ignore. And so that, I think, a realization is there and is increasingly there across organizations. um, Now what they want to do about it may be an area which is fuzzy, and I must say that it was even more fuzzier in the pre-COVID world. I think in the post-COVID world, it's not such a fuzzy topic anymore, because I think one of the main things that happened as a result of the pandemic was the emergence of the human side of enterprise. And I think there's no denying the fact that people are a very significant element of business. And not that they weren't in the pre pandemic times, but I think it kind of very apparently emerged as organizations, that clearly can't run business if they don't uphold people and talent that actually make the business possible. So, this human side of enterprise, which is really valuing talent, valuing people, valuing how they feel, and whether they experience positive or negative emotions at work, whether they feel heard, whether they feel included, whether they are in a mental frame to contribute. I think
Yeah.
all of these elements have become extremely important for organizations. I mean, we never in the past heard so much about mental health as we do right now. And
Right.
it's not as if we didn't have mental health challenges even in the past. It's just that we learned how to cope around negative emotions. And I
Yes.
think now we're basically talking about a time where it's important to be able to consider this, because it has a very significant impact on productivity and performance. It has a very significant impact on the experience of work. It has a very significant impact on your brand, on how people feel about being able to be associated or working with you. And so organizations are waking up to this because it's not something which happens in the privacy of people, and it's up to them on whether they're resilient enough to cope with this or not. And if they're not, then they must find the strength to be able to cope with it. I think increasingly there is an understanding that, that this is an area we need to be interested in to be able to figure whether there are any trends, anything that we see emerging in a repetitive pattern which requires our intervention. And so I've had leaders ask me, what have we got to do with the mental health of our employees? I mean, they might have personal challenges or something else they're coping with. I don't quite understand why I should be interested in their sort of mental health. And I think there are a couple of responses to that. One is that people spend a lot of their waking hours at work. And so, whether it's in person or otherwise, they're associated with the manager who's actually leading them. And so, that person has a very significant influence on how people feel about work. And so you can't not be concerned about what that after feeling or residual feeling of working with you is. The second thing is that it has a direct impact on productivity and performance. And so you should be interested in knowing how people feel about certain things that you perhaps need to improve as a manager or a leader. And so, this whole orientation of servant leadership, to be able to understand you're there to serve people and to enable people to contribute to the organization, and you're not their big boss who's supposed to only give them instructions and basically evaluate their performance and, have subtle messaging around career consequences if they speak up or if they say something. So you can't have that command and control kind of sort of uh, almost demonic styles which people kind of got away with in the past. You can't anymore. Also, you're dealing with multi generations at work, and so clearly, I think there isn't an appetite clearly with the millennials and the Gen Z, which is the largest part of the workforce today. And I don't think they have the appetite for that kind of style because they haven't even been parented in that style to begin with. And so they don't have the appetite for this, and rightly so, because they believe that they are that they are adult professionals contributing and deserve to be respected for what contributions they're making. And notwithstanding if they're in early stages of their careers, whoever is leading them is also an employee and is representing the organization and must treat them well. And I think so, in many ways, while these are times of upheavals on all these fronts, because we're learning how to deal with lesser power distance, we're learning how to deal with people, who are at junior levels, wanting a voice, wanting to contribute, wanting to give you feedback. I think all of these are very new experiences for people, and I think particularly for Gen X, which is still in the workforce, this is very disturbing because that isn't the environment in which they've actually grown up as professionals. And I think all of this counts to the experience of work and has a direct impact on your ability to contribute. And for example, if you're saying that I want people closest to a problem to solve a problem in my organization, so that means that I don't just hire well qualified people, I groom them and train them and coach them to be ready to be able to contribute through problem solving. It means I've created a culture of problem solving in my organization where people are encouraged to solve problems. And that, which means that we value people's intellect, we value people's ability to solve a problem, that we basically empower people to solve a problem, and that we haven't created tall hierarchies where everything needs to be escalated upwards and needs committees and needs meetings and needs long drawn conversations before we can decide what to do. So I think one of the game changers in these times is the agility with which you need organizations to act. And I think this is a market compulsion. So one of our clients, we were doing OKR and strategic pillars defining exercise with all of them, and we were discussing what this year's strategic pillar should look like. So this is breaking down the strategy into 6 or 7 areas of focus, which the organization can then cascade down to different levels, and everyone is clear on what the strategy might be for this year. So we were doing this exercise, and during the conversations, things veered towards, what kind of an ecosystem would be required to actually execute these strategies. And what became very apparent is what was cutting across our 6 strategic pillars was agility. And so we created a seventh pillar, which was agility as part of the strategy. And so now you might say agility is a behavior, and it is, but it is as important as any part of the strategy. And so we define that as one of the strategic pillars. And so just like you review whether you've achieved a particular strategic pillar or not, or how far you've come with it, or what else you can do to be able to augment that pillar, the organization every quarter sits back to be able to look at how well are we doing on agility, what do we need to do to augment agility, which teams are doing well on agility, which are the others which require support, which are the ones which are weak links in the chain, which are the ones slowing us down, what can we do to be able to build these teams so that they're able to augment agility as a very defining strategic pillar within the organization. So I think this itself is a great story in terms of how culture is increasingly becoming a very significant part of what we will do with the business this year. And so it's in sort of including the element on how we will do the business this year. So it's not just what we will do with the business this year, but how we will do the business this year.
I think you touched upon a couple of points again on terms of you made one important point because the time that we spend in an organization, I was telling my team here when I had a team meeting, we spend almost 8 to 9 hours predominantly in the office. Now I was telling them how you should be connected. You should be connected more than the time you spend here, more personally. Yeah, understand each other, understand what are the challenges or what is that you're learning. Also, could be one of the discussions that we can take as a culture. So, when
Hmm.
you bring up this culture of having a personal touch or an emotional connect with each other, they become stronger in terms of handling the issues because when I have a personal connect and we Indians, if we are looking at have a local speaking language speaking there, that becomes much more added there. Now, if I am from Maharashtra and I speak Marathi, the connect itself is different.
Hmm.
And if I'm there from Karnataka and I have a Kannada speaking guy in the team, if I talk two words, and this is more what I've seen in the when you are abroad and international travel, and your customer place, you find a local guy, the conversation or the whole way of working itself changes. That means we are trying to build in a culture. We are culture diverse people, and that makes a lot of difference for us to bring up people. Now in Bangalore, we have multiple people, multiple states people coming here. We have people from Maharashtra, you have from Gujarat, you have from Kerala, you have from Tamil Nadu, you have from Andhra Pradesh. These people, when they are a team, they try to understand their culture. That is one more thing. And nowadays, if you really look at also is people ask what is the culture of the organization before they join. Am I allowed to speak? Am I allowed to tell something openly? Is there a platform that I have to run around? So looking at that, culture plays a very important role on the as many pointers that you have were able to put across, you put them across. What are the some examples where we have successfully aligned or a company has successfully aligned the culture with their strategy, and what could be some of the lessons that we can take from that kind of an organization or any organization? And we don't want to name the organizations,
Yeah.
but how do we look at when an organization gets a culture embodied into their system?
Yeah. So, I mean, I work with NDAs with all my clients. So I will basically, only call out a few examples of how it is that I've seen organizations align their culture with their strategy. I just mentioned the one that actually ended up putting agility as a seventh pillar, a seventh strategic pillar. Which was again a great way to call out that they were not going to be able to achieve their strategy that year if they weren't very agile. They didn't
Hmm.
see agility as a strength within the organization, so they created a strategic pillar called agility. So I think that is a great example. I think there's another one which I would want to call out is this is an organization that very interestingly is a late entrant in a very competitive market and competes with multinational companies. This is an Indian company.
Yeah,
Sorry. And so I think what is amazing was how this organization looks at managing performance. I'm sorry. Just give me a second.
yeah,
Sorry. So I think it's interesting to see how they manage performance, right? So they do have a 3-year strategy. They even have a 1-year business plan, but they don't look at their annual business plan uh, in an annual terms. They'll break it up into every quarter, and so every quarter, everyone comes in, which is literally the entire organization comes in. So heads of all the functions come in, and their one downs, two downs also come into this room. So this is a very active room, and what they do is they set their goals for that quarter, right? And and they're looking at uh, getting everyone, each team, to take at least 2 or 3 moonshot goals. So take goals which are stretch goals, which look like impossible right now, but everyone must take a few stretch goals. And so everybody takes these stretch goals, and they all go back to try and see how it is that they can achieve what they set out as goals. But they only take this on a quarterly basis. Now they come back at the end of the quarter, and all they do is they're spending time together to be able to look at how it is that they can sit down to discuss how much they achieved out of the goals that they set out to achieve. And everyone's giving people inputs on what the experience was in the market. And there's no consequence. The culture is there's no consequence for not achieving your goals, but there is a consequence for not learning from the process. I'm so sorry. So there is a consequence for not learning from the process. So every quarter you come back, you talk about the goals that you attempted to achieve, and especially the stretch goals. So you're allowed to say, I didn't achieve my goal, but you're not allowed to come back to talk about the problems that you experienced while you were trying to achieve the goal. And everyone around in the room helps people who have experienced those challenges by being able to suggest responses and perhaps solutions to that problem. So the whole room works on being able to solve these problems, maybe from their own experiences, saying, oh, when we experienced this, we did XYZ. Somebody else says, when we experienced this, we did XYZ. So they're kind of crowdsourcing solutions in the room. You know what I mean? So basically, you're getting everyone to contribute to the quality of what they're experiencing, and the problems that they're experiencing, and the solutions that everyone can contribute to together. So it's okay to not achieve your goal, but the rhythm is that you fail fast, learn fast, fail fast, learn fast, fail fast, learn fast. And by the end of the year, what the organization is finding is that most people achieve at least 70% of their moonshot goals.
true.
And the way in which they're doing this is by creating a benign environment on not creating a huge consequence for no action. There is a consequence for not learning from a challenge. There is a consequence for not being able to discuss their problems openly so that they can find a solution which they can go back to the market to apply. So I think particularly pioneering companies typically adopt a fail fast, learn fast, because they're still testing the market to be able to see what they can do differently. And they want to come back and they want to build agility in terms of being able to try a new strategy in the next quarter and a new strategy in the next quarter. And they're doing this constantly by experimenting. Now, how do you create a spirit of experimentation? How do you create a spirit where mistakes, yeah, are you have the ability to understand blameworthy and praiseworthy mistakes. You have the ability to understand that there's so many mistakes that you do, or failure, if you want to call it that a lot of your failure is a prerequisite for success. And this organization has, in a very short period of time, garnered more than 30% of the market share And they've managed to do that by creating this fail fast, learn fast, fail fast, learn fast rhythm within the organization. And I think it's fabulous to be able to see this in action. And I think it's also lovely how it is that they have contained what it is that they are attempting to be able to achieve by looking at it as a quarterly window.
I will add something that you said here. Fail fast, fail, learn and redo it. That's one point. While I was in my previous organization, we had one training program where we were told why people don't want to tell that they failed or they could not voice up is because, as you rightly said, they are turned down or not encouraged to talk about failure. The first point is that. The second point that I understood over is if a leader or a manager says that you fail, but don't fail it there again. If there is
Mm.
a failure, let's look at why we failed, and I'm there for it. That kind of a support is what I've got from my lucky. I think in that case, I've got great managers whom I worked for. Everybody has been very clearly telling me that yes, you can experiment, but you should be in a position to say that I did a failure and this failure, this is where we understood and this is where we failed and this we are going to rectify. And if there's a buy-in from the customer and the management where we can get the confidence, I think failing fast and getting up things done quicker is not a challenge, is what I understand. Now, coming to that point, there are a lot of common problems that we face while getting into this culture. Now, what are some of the most significant or how do we integrate these pitfalls when we talk about culture and strategy getting integrated? Any?
I think the most common pitfall is not recognizing culture as a very defining and significant a sort of prerequisite to achieving strategy. I think not recognizing that is a pitfall.
Okay.
I'll start with that, and then perhaps I think another big pitfall is to not recognize, even as you're executing strategies, to not be unable to recognize which culture elements or principles that we have upheld as an organization is preventing us from being able to succeed. So, for example, if there has been high tolerance for silo working, which is a very common challenge across organizations, you could easily have huge problems in terms of, have huge problems in terms of getting people to collaborate, because collaboration has value at the center of it. People think it's a socially desirable behavior. It's not. It's right
Mm.
at the center of being able to create value. And when you don't collaborate, you actually erode value. And
Yeah.
so yeah, so and it could be because of various rhythms of insecurity in the organization, or the way in which traditionally the leaders have been behaving, which is where everyone has their own territory and so on. So this is not uncommon at all, and I think it can be very significantly the center of the impact that you can actually create if you did actually collaborate. I think so. Collaboration is a big one. I think a lot of lip service to innovation and customer centricity. So customer centricity again is basically, uh, again, it's collaboration on the inside that manifests as customer centricity on the outside. So even customer centricity gets very significantly hampered if you do not have collaboration inside the organization. And a lot of these have just become great words to talk about. You know what I mean? It actually requires a lot of wisdom to collaborate. Which brings me to the other part that I see within organizations. As we speak, I think it's not uncommon for There's a lot of upheaval in the top leadership levels across organizations. A lot of new entrants, a lot of people who have moved out, new people have come in, and so on. We didn't see so much of it immediately after the pandemic, but we're seeing a lot of it now.
Yeah.
It's also not uncommon to have a new CEO on board, and
Mm.
this is a huge upheaval, because if when the CEO also changes, then there is obviously a shift in style and a shift in expectation, and everyone needs to now realign to what
Yeah. Yeah.
the new CEO, the new leader might really expect. So
And
I think that an outcome of this flux is that while there is a huge, and that's usually positive in my view, which is wanting younger people in the C at the CXO in the C-suite. Wanting to see people who are in their early 40s, mid 40s in the C-suite. I think it's a good trend. Uh, I mean, you did see some part of it before the pandemic, but I think there's a huge push to be able to want younger people in the C-suite. Now, the flip side of that is to be able to want to build gravitas and maturity in these groups. So, the technical and functional capabilities are great. However, the kind of maturity and wisdom you need to be able to lead large teams, and that part is still work in progress. And so I think that can be a pitfall, which is when you don't have high levels of maturity. So you have people who are very smart. They can be strategy smart and business smart, but they're not very, very people smart. They're not
People.
very people and culture smart. So I think those are the areas which still need some building. And a lot of organizations are taking to coaching and psychometric based feedback, so that there's greater and higher self-awareness and the rest. But there's a lot of recognition around the need for this, but it can be a pitfall, is the point I'm making, which is you have smart people but not mature people at the top of the organization.
I think you
Yeah.
took another point there and you said values are important to have, and those values which we bring into the culture. How do we ensure cultural values are reflected in strategic goals? And what is your experience on a personal front for these cultural values getting reflected to strategic goals?
I mean, I just give you the example of agility. You know what I mean? I think agility is one piece that all the organizations are struggling with, because in the brick and mortar times, you worked at a very different pace as an organization.
Yeah.
Even the market worked very differently. The market's changing very fast and furiously, and it's important to remain competitive, to remain differentiated. You got to be able to shift, move fast. And agility is an outcome of cohesiveness. So the ability to be aligned, ability to work together, ability to solve problems together, all of that. So it is such a big test of your ability to work and connect with human beings. What you call social and emotional intelligence. It's a big test of that. Your ability to work with other people, with diverse people in a very speedy manner. Ability to strike rapport with people in a very speedy manner. I think it's right at the center. It's the central engine to what it is that the strategy is saying it wants to achieve. And I think there's a huge recognition when there are huge opportunities to grow. All organizations are looking to scale up. There's so many of our clients who are growing 3x, 4x during the coming year. And these are superb opportunities to see coming, especially for the ones who are bringing in big remits to India. It's fantastic to see this. Now, the next thing that they have is a challenge around talent, which is how we're going to bring in the right kind of talent in. And the minute you bring in the talent, you're asking the question on how are these people going to work together? Because it's one thing to run an organization which is 1,000 people. It's another one to be able to run an organization with 20,000 people. And it's still another shift when you're saying, I want to work with 40,000 employees. So I'm just saying a lot of organizations are experiencing this kind of scaling up. And it's extremely important to have the right kind of ecosystem to be able to support this kind of scaling up. So it is invariably an integral sort of it's the mechanism to be able to achieve the strategies. You can't achieve the strategy if you didn't look at this. And I think the recognizing, and I'm going to call that out again, which is recognizing the human side of enterprise, to be able to say that people are the ones who are going to take us there. And so what are we doing with people to be able to take us there? So it's not just about being able to hire qualified and people from the same industry who might have the experience to do the job. I think understanding the chemistry of people working together to be able to make things happen, and the way in which you kind of position who you are as an organization culturally to your people. So there was a time where if you did a lot of partying with your employees, or you had a lot of fun and games in the organization, people would say, oh, this is such a nice fun organization. And I must say that people have come a long way from being able to say, oh, because we did a couple of pizza and beer parties, we're having a great time in this organization. They're very clear about what they're expecting from the organization, which is to be led by someone who is mature, has the ability to connect with different kinds of people within the organization, who does not play games, does not have inner coteries and outer coteries, is fair, is open to feedback, will give you feedback so that they're able to support you, are acting as your coach so that they're able to get you to do your best, are people you can trust. I mean, there are many dimensions to say, am I having a good time in this workplace? And I think everyone's raised the bar on the employer on that, which is good, which is great, which is the way to go. And I think that's why I'm not surprised that the fifth industrial revolution is defined by the heart, which is really to say it's got to do with human connection, it's got to do with human beings, it's got to do with basically your culture, it's got to do with relationships, and that everything you're going to achieve, it's not just the machines, it's got to do with the power of relationships, culture, human beings, your ability to remain connected. I mean, clearly these times belong to to, I think, an adage that if you don't connect with people, you can't lead. And so it's got to be your prerequisite to being able to get anything done with people. And so I think it has naturally become a part of the strategy, which is how do we inspire people to do this rather than instruct them to do this. And I think it's becoming, I'm not saying people are there yet. I think this is work in progress, but there's a great realization around this. I think that itself is a wonderful start, because it's going to improve finally the experience of work for people. It's going to compel employers to create workplaces that are not toxic, that are not unfair, that are not draconian, you know what I mean, that are not a sort of sweatshops. And I think we're coming a long way from there. And most organizations, even mid-size MSMEs, waking up to the need to be refined modern organizations.
I think touched upon a lot. I have a couple of comments coming in from Ranjit Goswami. He says, I'm not able to bring them onto the screen. I'll read it out for you on this. Yeah. Uh, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
So the first point that it's Ranjit is saying, A versus steel versus cement versus power sector. Agility critical for former. That's one point. Incremental changes and radical changes would love if you dwell on that. Okay, that's another point that he has raised. Simple encouraging failures, celebrate failures. Yeah, that's another point. And the sound, there is some issue. I think there was a sound disturbance, something that is a feedback that has come. You are able
I
to
see.
hear me clearly, right? And I am able to hear you. We'll look
Yeah,
at that. That is one point that
yes.
we, and there is a mention of slow disturbance, slowness, that we look at it. Thank you for that. Ranjit has couple of comments. We'll respond it one by one, Ranjit, on the chat that we have. We have listed of a lot of things. I'll run through them. Now, coming back to the next point, that is, how can uh, or what can be the most significant personal learning about uh, interplay between culture and strategy, and how do we shape our leadership style?
All right. I think that when you say that I understand the interplay between strategy and culture, it
Mhm.
just simply means that I know and understand and recognize that strategy is my plan or my intention.
Okay.
And yeah, and it's my aspiration. And that to achieve this, I need people who feel aligned and inspired to do this. And unless I address whatever are the impediments or pain points that can come in the way of executing the strategy, I'm not going, it's going to be a great strategy on paper, I'm not going to be able to translate this. And so I think it's the wisdom to understand that we need to overcome our impediments. And the impediments could be, for example, that the teams don't work well together, or the impediments could be that we don't attract the right kind of talent, or the impediments could be that we don't have a problem solving culture. The impediments could be that we have um, we're a very power centric organization, so everything needs to get escalated upwards. And so therefore we're too slow for true decision making, we're too slow to market, we're too slow on execution. So recognizing this is the first step. And to Ranjit's point on change management, and I didn't go there because that's another wide subject, and I decided to stay with strategy and culture because that's what your questions were. But needless to say, when you're saying that I want to adapt the culture to the strategy, it requires change management. It requires us to recognize what it is that we need to do differently or better, or what is there inherently in our practices that could easily be in the way of us achieving our strategy. I'll give you an example. So, with one of our clients, I remember when we were doing in 18, we do something called 18-month roadmap for change. So, we were doing that for them. And during the discovery, somebody told us that, oh, we won innovation award internally. So there was some internal awards, and they had won an innovation award. Now, this organization was struggling to be able to gain market share, and we were helping them to be able to find out how culture could become, a differentiator, and how they could build on culture to achieve what they wanted to. And while we were doing the discovery, we got told that they won an award on innovation. So we tried figuring what the innovation was.
Okay.
The innovation was as follows: they had a tech platform that they'd created, which allowed them to be able to garner from the dealer network. They could garner the um, data on model wise, lead generation.
Okay.
And so they were garnering that data, and then they were garnering the same data through an app which the salespeople had, but they were also picking up uh, data on lead generation. And this data was getting compiled together and going back into sort of enterprise planning into the organization, so that this could add value to the to the supply chain in terms of being able to reduce cost. So it was creating projections for them in terms of how it is that they could actually figure, it allowed them to be able to reduce cost on their procurement as a result of knowing this data in advance. All right. And so and so it sounded great, and it was there were two tech platforms, but they spoke to each other. Now when
Okay.
we went out to go and figure how this was being executed, the because the dealer network was in rural areas, they didn't have people to enter into the system, into the tech system. So who do you think went there and entered it in their system? The salespeople did. Now the salespeople also entered it in the app, so it was actually the same data, right? And if you looked at the time that was consumed in being able to enter this data in both places, on an average, they took anything between 6 or 7 days a month to be able to enter this data into both the systems, which is 1 week gone from a salesperson's life, because
Yeah.
you're trying to keep um, these tech platforms going in terms of whatever was the data that was recorded is mandatory to enter it in there. And they were losing 6 days, which was literally like the last week of the month, doing this instead of going out and selling. And you're doing this in a competitive market where you're trying to increase your market share, and all your other strategies are focused on being able to increase market share, but you're using your salespeople to do this in the last leg, in of the month, which is when the competition is pounding the pavement to be able to sell their product in the market. So we can often have practices, we can have processes, we can have certain rituals in the organization that can be very counterproductive to what it is that the strategy is trying to achieve. So so this was an example to be able to tell you how this can very significantly sort of come in the way of what it is that you're trying to achieve. To Ranjit's point on change management, I mean, incremental change versus change, and I think whether it's incremental or whether it's whether it's a large change agenda, I think it's important to recognize it. It's important to have people who are skilled in being able to manage it. And increasingly, there's an area of work that I've been advocating to my clients, which is in the area of stability management. So while we all want to drive change, we must not lose sight of the things that are working in our organization. And
Yeah.
what is already working well really needs to be maintained and nurtured. I think in our melee of sometimes being self deprecating around, oh, but we don't do this well and we're not doing that so greatly, and oh, we need to change everything. You know what I mean? I think there's always every organization where a lot of things are already working. So I think managing stability in an organization is also very, very important. And having an appreciative lens towards what is working in your organization. You wouldn't be there if there weren't things that were working. And so it's
Yeah.
very important to uphold that part. And then, of course, the piece on what needs to be changed was have the courage to be able to change it. And more people who are skilled on how to change things. I think a lot of people, a lot of organizations have good intentions around change, but don't have people who have the capability to drive change. And I think all of this is it's very important to skill people on change management. I think it's exceedingly important.
Yeah.
Also, for the top leadership to be able to know what their leadership stands for, that self awareness is so important so that you are able to perpetuate parts of your leadership down to the organization. I think very many people at top leadership levels pass their leadership on only to next levels. I think it's very important when you're on the top of the organization that people, the last man standing should know what your leadership stands for. And that doesn't mean that you interfere in the elbow room of the people who are leading other teams down the line. But you
Yeah.
can't be disconnected with people who are down the line. They can't be disconnected with your leadership.
I
I
think
also
one point that came up was in, I think, on John C. Maxwell's book, The Five Leadership Levels. He talks about this levels of what you're talking in stuff. The leadership should elevate from the position that you start and you grow up the ladder. Okay, over
Hmm.
the period you are at level one, level two, level three, level four, but you should never leave a sight of the level you started with, and you cannot take everybody to the top, because you will interact with people at level 1. For some people, maybe if there are 100 people, you take 20 people up the level 2, and you still have to talk to the level of 80 people at the level of level 1. And he gives you a neat platform or the path that how leadership journey should be when you go on top. And you made that very important point, the top leadership coming to know what the ground leader person is doing with that kind of a clarity, not disturbing or not getting in the middle and understand, but you be there as a support for them, and you continuously help them, saying that I am there for you, kind of a support that you give. That's what I think you've been talking over
Yes.
some time. If I may have correctly told what you're talking about.
Yes, yes. I think that all levels through the organization need to be coached on their own leadership,
Yeah.
and so unless the top leadership is involved across levels, and it sounds tough to do, especially if the organization is very large. But whoever said that leadership is an easy job, it's not,
It's
and
not.
so it's required for people to be able to be involved down the line and to coach other people to their own leadership, but and not to presume that people down the line know how to lead people. I think there
Okay.
is a lot of presumptions, especially when organizations start scaling up and becoming really large. There's a lot of presumptions that things are in place, and I think we shouldn't get carried away with presuming things. I think it's important to be able to put a foot into various places to be able to make sure that you're not overwhelming people with your presence, but you have the wisdom to be able to make sure that your leadership is experienced by people down the line.
Yeah. We'll touch upon another 2 points that I would want to ask, because we are running on top of the hour. One is about how can we have challenges and crisis looked at in strategy, and how do we engage employees. That those are two things that I want to look at from a strategic point, from your view, Dr. Sujaya.
You're asking how do you engage people. So I think
Yes,
first
how
of
to
all,
engage.
yeah, so I think that this piece on employee voice or involving people across the organization is a big challenge across organizations, and particularly in India, because we presume that they have lesser experience and lesser knowledge, and they would not be able to contribute to strategies, which is not true.
Yeah.
So some organizations have asked me, how do we involve people across the board on strategies? Because normally strategy is top down, right? I mean, you create and formulate strategies, and then you cascade them and you communicate them to people down the line.
Yeah.
um, I think the opportunity with strategies is to also do a bottoms up on strategy, which
Mm.
is to be able to start by saying, for example, and there are organizations doing this, which is they start out with a few lines on the strategy, saying these are the top 5 lines or 6 lines on our strategy. If you had $100, right, as an employee, yeah, divide the $100 across these 6 lines of strategies for us and tell us what you value the most out of this, right? And so and people do that so that they're able to give weightages in terms of what they value most in the strategy, and then people higher up can see why or how or what are the kind of patterns that are emerging. So I think getting people to participate in terms of formulating strategies is very important. I mean, to ignore the voice of the front line or people down the line is a very naive proposition in today's time. These are not the same as the people who started their careers many years ago. These are children of the knowledge era. These are people who basically are born to technology. They have access to customer intelligence, to market intelligence. They have access to a lot of information which you can garner by being able to get their perspective on what our organizations should value most or what our organizations should be focusing on this year. And so, even to get that perspective in, I don't think most organizations make the effort to do that. If you look at most of the leadership offsites for strategy or for goal alignment or business alignment or whatever other conversations that the organization is trying to have, um, at best it would have leadership in -1. In some organizations, it's sometimes -2 as well,
Okay.
but you seldom find people from the mid level or from the junior level, especially invited to attend the strategy offsite. And I do know some organizations are trying to do this, but it's not very common. And I think it's a great idea to invite a few every year, and give them a chance to be able to participate in the creation of strategies, because they're going to bring in a perspective that's very different from where they are. It's also a nice neat way to become more modern as an organization, because right at the top of the organization, very often, especially if you've had retention, if you have tenured people, then they've done this and thought like that and done things this way for a very long period of time, so they're trapped in the way they've been doing things for a long time. So it's very useful to bring in new people and younger people into the conversation, and just hear their perspective. I mean, you don't have to agree with everything they're saying, but at least to hear out that perspective. I think this listening in and engaging people across the board is very important. I don't think we're doing enough of it. It's because we're essentially a very power centric ecosystem. Even as a country, we like power distance and we enjoy power distance. We don't experience discomfort with power distance. So I think that kind of including voice is a very, very useful. It's going to be increasingly very meaningful, particularly for organizations who are very heavily dependent on market feedback, building on customer centricity, have strategies around innovation for this year. I think they have to be able to bring in voice from across. So engaging employees through voice, I think, is a very important one. I think the second thing is to be able to involve them through review discussions. And especially when you're trying to basically build momentum for, let's say, problem solving, or you're building momentum for agility in the organization, or quick to market, whatever you're trying to build in the for the year, is to involve more people at the mid and the junior level in your work streams, whatever the work streams you're creating for change, is to involve more people from the mid and the junior levels in these conversations, in these actions. And I'm very sure that if organizations actually involve them and include them, first of all, you will start changing the experience of work for these people. Two is you will get in their insights, perhaps their solutions using technology, which are more likely to be at the mid and the junior level as compared to the top of the organization. So it'd be great to be able to get that. When you think technology is a solution, or you think something is a solution, and they come in with new ideas, so you open up the space for new ideas. I find that even things like innovation. Now, innovation is in the you build innovation by being able to build it into the rhythm of execution in an organization. It's not only about having incubators or your R&D doing uh, innovation. So I think building the momentum for innovation requires innovation to redefine the standards of performance within the organization, to create an environment where people don't just restore their performance standards, but they use problems to be able to create new performance standards and so on. So it's in the rhythm of everyday work. It's not something that you do as a special project necessarily, or as something that you're doing because you have an incubator. So I think a lot of these need to be re-looked at in the context of execution. And if you do that, you will create the engagement that you require across the board in terms of people contributing and enjoying the process of contribution within the organization. And I think that's what you really need. You just need fair workplaces where people respect each other. I think that's another huge area of body of work for us at Capstone, which is helping organizations build cultures of respect. And again, this challenge of respect comes from the inherent sort of thinker doer divide we have within organizations. Presumption is that people at the top know everything, and the people below, from the mid level below, just don't have the experience or the wisdom to be able to tell you what the solutions can really be. So I think the engagement is going to come from inclusion. I think the engagement is going to come from voice. And I think that the inclusion is, I mean, the engagement is also going to come by through changing the style in which we are engaging with people. And so, the command and control styles are not going to work anymore. I think it needs to be an environment where you sort of reposition the leader as the coach or the teacher. And because we're not naturally aligned to the servant leadership orientation, we talk about it, and I think that some people do believe that they're trying, there are elements of it that they uphold. But I think we have the power centricity and the sort of power distance very deeply ingrained. And so maybe if you instead reposition leaders as coach and teacher, you're more
Yeah.
likely to get the environment of connection and support and joy, and respectful relationships.
I get you. Any advice or for and the final pointer that I want to have from you, what would be your advice for people who are from the freshers thinking about leadership or moving up to executives? What could be your advice for them?
I think it's a very good question because it's something that really bothers me. So I'm glad you're asking about this. And I'll tell you why it bothers me is because I think that the last 2 or 3 years, whoever has done a post graduation or a graduation, my sense is that they've come from a very fractured education system. And I think that it's because of the circumstances in which they have perhaps completed very significant parts of their education. And
Okay.
so, this is what I'm saying in short is that I believe that it is a more diluted education process as compared to what it is that we perhaps experienced many years ago. And
Mhm.
so I want to urge the young people to not just count on the class that they had access to, but to invest in their own development through reading and learning. You are in times where you have only yourself to blame for ignorance because there's so much available. Yeah, there are TED Talks available, there are so many courses available, there's so much help available online that you don't even need to get somewhere to be able to get
Yeah.
access to education. So you could be in a tier two town, you could be in any remote part of the country, and you can still get access to all of this. So you need a Wi Fi connection and you'll be done. So we have only ourselves to blame for our own ignorance. That's all that I want to say to all of you. And so when you say that you're children of the knowledge era, or you're the children of the internet, or you are basically the people who have been born to technology, then I want you to put your hand on your heart to say how much of technology do you really understand? How much of technology are you really using?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you even using the internet well? Forget anything else. And so, do you have useful queries that you're putting out? You're also in the AI era. So, how well do you want to use generative AI to be able to just not allow yourself to be ignorant in any form, in any place? And I think that's what technology, the knowledge era, is actually gearing you up for. And so, even if you didn't have access to that through your education, even if you didn't have access to that through your parenting, even if you didn't have access to that through the wisdom of friends and family, you have the internet, which is going to help you to be able to
Exactly.
become a world class citizen, to become a world class professional, to become world class at what you do. So these are the times that don't just belong to technology, they belong to excellence, to personal excellence. And that personal excellence has got to be a drive that you have internally for yourself. And it's got to be irrespective of what your employer needs you to know. I'm going to repeat that. It's irrespective of what your employer needs you to know. Yeah, your
Correct.
employer is the space where you actualize what you know. You actualize by learning more, right? It's one more course you're attending. You should treat it like that. And I'm saying that so it can't just be that this is the course syllabus. This is what my organization needs me to know. It's what does your profession need you to know? Yeah, and I find a lot of people, when they eventually leave the corporate world, they are so inadequate at being able to give advice or consulting to anyone, because they're just restricted by what it is that they were asked to do in their jobs, and they only know that, and they haven't really explored, the different dimensions of their of knowledge in the field in which they have actually spent so many years. So excellence has got to be your mantra. Personal excellence, irrespective of who your boss is, irrespective of what your organization needs you to know, irrespective of who is around you in terms of family and friends. This has got to be a soul journey, your own journey, to be able to excel and to actualize. So I'm going to leave this with you as advice in terms of what young people should do with themselves. I think you are in fascinating, we are all in fascinating and magical times, but you are the children of technology, and you got to be people who are experts at what it is that is being put out everywhere, and you got to be the people who are using it best. And so, particularly in the area of being able to make the most of yourself, presenting yourself in the best manner possible, having wisdom beyond your years because of the access of data and insights that you have. So you cannot blame anyone if you have not invested in serious perspective building by using the content that is available on social media and on the internet. So I invite you to be able to become the best version of yourself, and make this independent of your job, make it independent of your employer, make it independent of what people around need you to know. You got to pursue a personal journey of excellence, and I think that's my advice to all young people.
It's been great having you, her thoughts here. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Sujaya Banerjee. With this, we would like to conclude our session. We have this recording on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We are streaming live on this. Hope this session has found the audience valuable points that Dr. Sujaya Banerjee had to give us today. We have another topic which we are talking about tomorrow on the integration and continuous improvement in innovation. That's a continuation topic that we are talking with tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. IST. Till then, see you there. Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Sujaya.
you. Thank you. I want to apologize for the coughing in between because I'm just recovering from a flu, but I hope you got most of what I was trying to convey.
Thank you for being there in spite you're not keeping well. That's a great honor for us to have you
Thank
on the
you.
show. Thank you, Sujaya. Bye.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.